One thing we've not spoken about so far during this restoration is the engines. With the upper turret and the running gear now complete, the focus is now going to change to these while we continue to refit and rewire the hull. At some stage, no matter how much work you do in the refurbishment, reconditioning and rebuilding of some parts, you do need to go out and search, particularly when you're trying to get a vehicle into running condition, and look for new old stock parts. Invariably, this means an awful lot of phone calls and emails, and you end up in someone's shed looking through loads and loads of boxes for the parts that you need. This was certainly the case as far as we were concerned. The only surprise was where the shed actually turned out to be. We've been very fortunate to be invited out to Australia to meet Mac McMahon and to get some driver training and the engine parts with his Matilda tank.
Batrack International is the Busted Ass Tank Repairs and Co. It's a loose association of friends and associates that we bang around on weekends when we should be doing other things probably, much to my wife's disgust. And we spend a lot of time in the shed doing it's like a men's shed, before men's sheds were fashionable. We've had a lot of fun this week, and we've been helping Jonathan and the boys back in England with the rebuild of their Matilda. I guess we've been fortunate enough to have an enormous amount of parts. They've been hard come by, of course. We've had to scrounge all over the eastern side of Australia to find them, and into South Australia. But we're more than happy to help Jonathan and the Tank Museum get their Matilda up and running, because there's very few Matildas running. Of the 4,500 that we rebuilt, or that the British Empire built, there's probably only about 10 running in the world. Yeah, this is a Mark IIA, and it's a great old tank. Dad bought it in the 70s, and we've been banging around with it ever since and keeping ourselves broke maintaining it. But when it's running, it's good fun.
Another important aspect of being able to drive the vehicle is to learn from someone firsthand who's been operating one on a regular basis, the pre-start checks and the maintenance, how the vehicle steers, and what to expect when we eventually come to starting up our own Matilda and taking it out for its first drive. Part of the startup procedure for the vehicle that I've been shown since I've been out here is when it's on cold, it's important that you press these two excess fuel plungers. This gives the fuel injection pump more fuel and makes it easier for the engine to start. It was a wonderful opportunity to be able to drive the vehicle in open country, which even the drivers that have driven our Matilda in the past haven't been able to do. The steering on the Matilda was relatively light, considering it was clutch and brake, and surprisingly good at tight turns. The gearbox and transmission on the Matilda is what we call a pre-select, in that the driver has a stick which he can select the next gear that he requires, and when he wants to engage it, he uses a foot pedal on the left-hand side of the driver's foot controls to engage that gear. What's different though from other tanks that I've driven in the past with this type of arrangement is that on the pre-select range it doesn't change between gears automatically, and each gear has to be changed up or down in sequence. This gives the driver something to think about prior to making a turn, as he has to go down through all of the gears to get to the lower ranges so that he can complete tight turns, and more importantly, when he wants to stop, he needs to activate the foot pedal in order to get the tank into neutral. There are two engines in Matilda. Ours are made by Leyland, earlier ones were made by AEC, and they work together in concert through a shared cross drive to deliver power to the remainder of the tank. This power pack, as it's described nowadays, sits in the pack bay in the rear of the vehicle. It's wonderfully described in the Matilda workshop manuals as an engine house. We're very lucky here at the museum that Les, the guy who made the rubber bump stops for the bogie units on the suspension, was apprenticed to Leyland, and he's agreed to take lead on the engine rebuild. Before all this could be done, both engines had to be stripped completely and examined for faults. The ancillaries were stripped off first, and once the block was disassembled, the water galleries had to be thoroughly cleaned. The point being to remove debris and rust particles from the coolant galleries. This was firstly done by power washing, and then once the engines had been dried, the whole process was repeated again, as there was still more dirt to be found. The faults we found on the engine when we stripped it apart were the camshaft. They were quite badly worn. You can see now on this camshaft lobe the wear. It's gone through the hard metal and there's pitting on the bearing surfaces. The piston rings, they were worn below the tolerance, and the pistons also showed signs of wear and needed replacing. The big end bearings at the bottom of the con rods were scored, and the main bearings, which the crankshaft sits in, were also badly scored and needed to be replaced. In order to complete the short build on the engines, first the liners are honed using a special tool. Once we're happy with that, the engine's turned upside down and the pistons are installed and the crankshaft. When the engine's turning how we like it, we can then fit the oil pump and then sump, and then that is the short build of the engine complete. With the volunteers working on the engine, that frees up Bob and I to carry on with the wiring of the hull and the fitting of the timing case. And then the whole process has all got to be repeated for the second engine.